Hello and welcome to Bubble Austria, Part 3, Reform and Recuperation. Last we left off with Austria expand and try to take control of the new lands in Hungary and Bohemia, as well as losing the 30 Years' War, which heavily reduced Habsburg's power within the now heavily uncentralized Holy Roman Empire. The one thing they had gained from the war was the suppression of Protestant within the lands, and soon Jews became even more suppressed, being banished from Vienna and other parts of the realm. Leopold I, the new Austrian Archduke, wanted to help his Spanish allies against the new major European power of France, but had to abandon the goal of becoming empire and keep his allies in the HRE. This meant Leopold had to accept the French expansion or ally with Protestant powers, but soon the fear of France became too large and Austria joined the Franco-Dutch War. But even with Holy Roman help, the French won, expanding into the Spanish Netherlands and the French Commote. But the involvement of Austria in the war angered the Hungarians, since the country had to propose an undesirable peace with the Ottomans after victorious battles to participate. This soon led to large revolts from the Protestant Hungarians, called the Kurok Rebellion. At first, Leopold tried to calm the revolters by giving Protestant more rights, but this was not enough, since they now also had support from the Ottomans. But the Ottomans only served to rally the HRE against the Hungarians, and a combined force of Austrians, other Germans and Polish managed to break the siege occurring in Vienna, and they combined with the strength with the undamaged Austrian main force managed to push back the Ottomans as far as Belgrade. Start of the 9 Years' War soon halted the advance and Belgrade was lost. But before long, Austrians were ready again and managed to conquer the rest of Hungary and a large part of modern-day Croatia from the Ottomans. After this, Leopold also granted Hungary and Transylvania the constitutions and Protestant rights. In return, they became hereditary monarchies in the Habsburg line. The Spanish line was soon after having a succession crisis, with their king, Carlos II, either suggesting an Austrian or a French to claim as such. Until his death day, it seemed that Leopold's second son, Karl, was to become heir. But just before Carlos died, the grandson of the French King Philippe of Anjou, the French King Louis XIV, offered a petition to Leopold, but he did not accept, leading to the War of the Spanish Succession. This war saw another alliance between Austria and a Protestant nation in the form of Britain, and together they won a string of victories. Bayern also joined France, but Austria, together with the UK and the Dutch, who were also at his side, won a large victory, putting Bayern out of the war. The war continued, and the Allies were on the brink of victory when Joseph III, the emperor for most of the war and heir to Leopold, died, leaving Karl to the throne, which would upset the balance of power too much if he would come to be both Holy Roman Emperor and Spanish King, which his allies could not allow, which meant a worse peace treaty for Austria. Even if they lost Spain, they still gained most of their European empire, such as Milan, Naples, Mantua, Sardinia, and the Spanish Netherlands, or modern Belgium. Most of these victories would be hard to keep, but still made Austria once again one of the largest powers in Europe. The economy was also able to largely grow in favor of the largest landowners and the state capitalists in Austria and Bohemia. Hungary, ravaged by war, was also being repopulated with Germans and Serbs. All this success led to the Austrian High Baroque. But the Austrian finance had long been held up by bankers, and when the central banker Samuel Oppenheimer died, and the Habsburg tried to stop their debt by bankrupting his bank, the financial system almost crashed and they had to revert back to the old system. This system needed reform, which Karl knew, but he did not know how to change it without ruining the system his power was built on. But even that needed to reform, as the current was almost feudal. It was also almost a succession crisis, as Karl had no male heir, and there was no law whether his daughter or the daughter of his elder brother would inherit, but he obviously chose his daughter. But it was no easy task to make his daughter, Maria Theresa, heir to the whole realm, with all of its subdivisions and different laws of succession. Conflict also renewed with the Ottomans, bringing further Habsburgs gain northern Bosnia and Banat of Temesvar. When Karl tried to increase his power in the Netherlands, or modern-day Belgium, he stepped over the line for the United Kingdom and united provinces, who wanted them to remain a continental power, which is sorry. With the alienation of the former allies, Austria lost further Italian territories in the Polish War of Succession. Another war with the Turks also saw most of the gains in the former war lost. Youths were soon also further discriminated against by a law forbidding non-firstborn youths from marrying in Bohemia. Soon after Maria Theresa took power, the Prussians invaded and conquered Silesia. Prussia's justification for this was to claim that Karl Albert of Bavaria was the heir to the throne instead of Maria Theresa, and after the defeat, the Bohemian and Upper Austrian Diets were ready to accept this accession, but Hungary stood firmly against it. Even worse, Karl Albert was elected Holy Roman Emperor, the first non-Habsburgs in centuries. Even though Austria did not come out well of the conflict, the death of Karl and the appointment of Maria's husband as emperor and the support of Hungary proved enough for the succession crisis to not destroy the empire. Maria Theresa held many of the beliefs of the Baroque rather than Enlightenment, especially when it came to religion, putting restriction on Protestants and expelling Jews from Bohemia. In other areas, she was more flexible, listening to lowborns and pushing for reforms. The fact of these reforms happened to the last part of Silesia, still under Austria, where they mirrored the success of the Prussian changes, with similar reforms in Austria proper and Bohemia occurring. By the 1750s, a new push to retake Silesia was started by allying with the former rival in France, Russia and Sweden to go to war with Prussia and the British. At first the war went well, with Berlin being crushed by the Brits, and the new Russian Tsar tried to ally with the current enemies in Prussia, which ended with Russia out of the war and Prussia being able to beat back Austria, and the war ended in a status quo in Europe. This setback demanded even more reforms and centralization, along other reforms, and by the 70s, the first balanced budget of Austria was achieved, with them even breaking a profit. For this to be able to happen, the old nobles had lost much of the power, with the same occurring to the church. The first schools were also lifted. The lord's right over peasants and the workload was also reduced. The queen's son and heir, Joseph, was even more prone to reform and pro-enlightenment, and contributed to the development of torture in Austria. In 1780, Maria died and Joseph took over. When he took over, he reformed censorship to be more liberal, increased Protestant freedoms, accepted Jews in Bohemia, and removed some of the harshest restrictions to them. He also further reduced church power, opening the best hospital in the world at that time, reformed the legal system, and abolished Bohemian, Hungarian, Inner Austrian, and Silesian serfdom. His approach to Hungary was also different from his predecessors, as they did not summon the Diet, and thus did not accept their sovereignty, as to not let them block his reform. He tried to do the same to Belgium with little success, with them putting up a revolt, with Hungary soon following suit. He also failed at the international diplomacy, leading to a war with the Turks, from which he died. But before that, the Prussians also joined a war, leading to Joseph suspending many reforms, especially in Hungary, to stop the revolts. Joseph's successor, Leopold II, managed to get a decent peace with both Prussia and the Ottomans, and managed to defeat the Belgian and Hungarian rebels by using their internal divisions. He also managed to keep most reforms, only giving small concessions to the church. But Leopold died 2 years after coming to power, leaving his son Francis II as ruler. But his reign will have to be explored next time. Hope to see you then.